Hi, this is Ron Malhotra from Maple Tree Wealth. Thanks for joining me. Today, I'm going to talk about psychology in the context of wealth creation. A lot of people believe that successful wealth creation or becoming a successful investor is all about knowledge and strategy. However, that couldn't be further from the truth. Emotions and the way we condition and the way we think plays a very important role when it comes to successful wealth creation or investing. Whilst there's many emotional and psychological biases that prevent people from becoming successful investors, there is four in particular that I'm going to talk about today that are the most common ones. So the number one psychological bias that prevents people from making good financial decisions is loss aversion. It simply means that once people have incurred a financial loss themselves or heard about somebody else that's incurred a financial loss, it puts fear in their mind and it paralyzes them from making financial decisions. There is a very famous saying, a cat that jumps on a hot stove will never jump on a hot stove again, but it will also not jump on a cold stove. So loss aversion is a very, very common psychological bias, and it's one of the main reasons why a lot of people do not invest. The second psychological bias that gets in the way of people making successful financial decisions is what we call recency bias, or the tendency to make financial decisions based on recent events rather than long-term proven fundamentals. So, for example, a decision that is based on events that have occurred in the last 5, 10, or 15 years will potentially carry more risk than a financial decision that is based on something that has repeatedly happened over the last 100 years. So recency bias is another common reason why a lot of people do not end up creating wealth, because they tend to base their decisions on recent events rather than long-term fundamentals. The third psychological bias is what we call the familiarity bias, which simply means people making financial decisions based on what they're familiar with, rather than decisions that will actually be will be based on proven fundamentals. So you see this very commonly with property. So a lot of people who are familiar with property or have had experience in a particular area will tend to stick to that area and avoid everything else, in many cases to their own detriment. So familiarity bias is a common reason why a lot of people end up making suboptimal financial decisions. And the last one is the overconfidence bias, or the tendency to have an exaggerated opinion about your own ability to make good financial decisions. So a lot of people do not seek advice, do not talk to anyone about how they should invest or where they should invest, because they feel overconfident in many cases about their ability to be able to make sound financial decisions, even though they may not necessarily have a track record. So just to summarize, there's four psychological biases that are very common and prevent people from making sound financial decisions. You've got loss aversion, familiarity bias, recency bias, and overconfidence bias. So it's good to be aware about your own psychological biases to see if you are potentially being held back or you're making the wrong financial decisions based on your own emotions and psychology. Thank you for listening to me. It's Ron Malhotra from Maple Tree Wealth.